Andy Mothibi, Advocate Andy Mothibi, who used to head up the SIU, has now been appointed as the NDPP. And it's interesting because we had 6 candidates that appeared before a panel. We've seen those interviews. They were televised here on the SABC. Let's speak to SABC News reporter Canny Maphanga, who has been tracking these developments. Kenny, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Firstly, let's speak about Advocate Mothibi.
Indeed. Good evening to you, Bongiwe, and to the viewers at home. It seems that the president has gone outside of the transparent process that we saw playing out last year, where you saw several candidates, that met the requirements to be interviewed for that post of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, and he has instead decided to appoint the current SIU head, as Advocate Andy Mothibi. However, formerly he is Advocate Jan Lekgoa Mothibi, and he will take up that post from the 1st of February 2026 as the National Director of Public Prosecutions. You know that he's the current head of the Special Investigating Unit, and you know the successes that this particular unit has achieved in terms of retrieving those funds that were owed back to the state as a result of alleged corrupt activities. But before he headed up that SIU and became successful in that particular unit, he did actually start as his career as a public prosecutor in Johannesburg and the lower courts in Soweto, as well as some of the regional courts there. And he's also had previous stints in public roles and private sector roles where he has managed issues such as legal compliance, risk management, and issues of that particular nature. But I think what is important to note, because many viewers will be wondering as to how the president reached this decision when we didn't see Advocate Mothibi being part of that list that had made it to the interviews in December last year. Essentially, what we are learning now through the presidency's statement is that when that panel, that advisory panel, which forms part of that critical consultative process by the president, completed their reports to hand over to President Ramaphosa on the 12th of December, it has been revealed that in that report, the panel actually advised the president that none of those candidates that they had interviewed were suitable for the role of the NDPP. Of course, that appointment is the powers afforded to the president, and of course, he takes that decision. However, it seems that in that consultative process, that the advisory panel concluded their report and actually advised the president that none of those candidates would be suitable. And the president, upon taking his decision, has decided to appoint the current SIU head as of the 1st of February 2026.
And Kenny, you and I were even talking about even the court action, right, at some point last week about the, the processes as far as this particular process is concerned and all of that, which has now been, laid by the Ulu attorneys. Let's speak about that and how then does it play out now?
Well, indeed, you know that at least 3 of the candidates that we saw in that list, I'm shying away from saying shortlist because the minister did say that these were the candidates that met the minimum requirements. And we're seeing now from the presidency's statement that they actually weren't able to shortlist anyone to advise the president to consider, but instead actually advised the president not to appoint any of the candidates or that they weren't suitable for that particular position. Now, there were 3 candidates, that is Advocate Andrea Johnson, that is the current IDAC head, Advocate Mandi Simelane, who used to hold the position of NDPP, and Advocate Hermione Cronje, who was the former inaugural IDAC head when that unit was established in after the Zondo Commission. And of course, I had to look at some of those cases that dealt with state capture-related matters, and of course that sophisticated organized crime that the NPA had to fight, and we've seen over some time that it is not quite an easy task for the National Prosecuting Authority to achieve. Now, we know that in terms of those candidates, there were several objections. Of course, most of the objections went to Advocate Andrea Johnson, but of course we did see a letter threatening to halt the process brought by the DA against a particular candidate, that is Advocate Mandi Simelane. Then, of course, the firm of attorneys, Barnabas Ulu, also filed a legal action regarding the process with respect to Advocate Hermione Cronje, which they felt was quote-unquote biased. because the objection was not put to her in time and she was not subjected to the same scrutiny as the other candidates. Well, that is the argument of the firm in the papers. Now, we know that those papers are currently in the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. However, it seems that the panel report has established that none of these candidates are suitable for the post. But the issue with the Barnabas Skulu application is that it deals with the process and whether the process is fair or just. So they may find it suitable, the applicants, to proceed in order to establish whether or not there was a fair process or not, but it won't have any effect on the president's decision, as he has not appointed any candidate outside of that selection process. He has, in terms of his powers, and after considering that panel report that decided that none of the candidates were suitable, he has made his own appointment in terms of the powers afforded to him in the Constitution, as well as the NPA acting, expecting that Advocate Mothibi will be taking that post on the 1st of February 2026. And, of course, Advocate Shamila Batohi, who is the current NDPP, will exit her office at the end of January.
And Canny Maphanga, they're always the finger on the pulse. Thank you so much for bringing us that roundup there of this breaking news story. And just to note, right, the president's statement saying that with the appointment of Advocate Mothibi as the NDPP, it leaves a vacancy with the Special Investigating Unit. But the president has now appointed Mr. Leonard Lekgoa as the acting head of the Special Investigating Unit with effect from the 1st of February 2026. And of course, he says that he is Mr. Lekgoa, in fact, currently serving as the Chief Operations Officer at the SIU. So the president wanted to make sure that there is no vacancy as far as the SIU is concerned.